Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking on a massive, truly epic chunk of ancient Chinese history, over 4,000 years of it to be exact. We're going to trace the journey from scattered little river valley settlements all the way up to a unified, highly centralized empire. And if there's one common thread tying all of this together, one driving force, it's the relentless, continuous pursuit of order that ended up shaping an entire civilization. It's a huge timeline, so let's just get right to it.
To help us navigate through all this history without getting lost, we're going to follow a distinct narrative arc across 5 chapters. Myth to historical memory, Shang, the first records, Zhou, the longest dynasty, a golden age of philosophy, and finally, the foundations of an empire. Starting with Chapter 1, Myth to historical memory, prehistoric roots.
Our journey actually begins about 10,000 years ago with this profound transition from hunter-gatherers to settled life. And what's fascinating is that it was built on a dual agricultural foundation. Up in the north, you had the unpredictable Yellow River, where the soil fostered hardy, drought-resistant crops like millet. But down south, the Yangtze River's warmer, wetter climate was the absolute perfect cradle for early flooded rice paddies. This geographic split is so baked into their DNA that it literally dictates the differences in northern and southern Chinese cuisine that you still eat today.
From those early farming roots, things evolved pretty rapidly. We see early regional groups like the Yangshao culture, known for their painted pottery, eventually give way to the walled towns of the Longshan. And that naturally pushes us right into the fiercely debated Xia dynasty. Now, the Xia is semi-legendary, but it's very closely tied to some very real, highly sophisticated palace discoveries at a site called Erlitou. And all of this sets the stage for the confirmed hard history of the Shang dynasty.
But, before we had hard-written history, ancient China relied on some incredibly rich myths to explain their origins. The absolute pivotal story here is about a figure named Yu the Great. When he was faced with catastrophic, world-ending floods, he didn't just stubbornly try to build walls to block the water. Instead, he dredged channels. He worked with the natural flow of the water. And that idea, channeling rather than blocking, became this enduring metaphor for wise moral governance. It's exactly what earned him the mythical right to establish the hereditary Xia dynasty.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, Shang, the first records, bones and bronze.
So you might be wondering, how exactly did a 19th century prescription for dragon bones reveal a lost ancient dynasty? Well, picture this. It's the 1890s, and an ailing scholar notices strange symbols carved into the animal bones he was just sold at an apothecary for traditional medicine. This sparks a massive, real-world archaeological detective story. Those so-called dragon bones were eventually tracked all the way back to the ancient city of Anyang, and they unequivocally proved that the Shang kings weren't just a myth, they were 100% real. It turns out these bones were actually oracle bones. They were used in a highly structured ritual to seek spiritual order from the heavens. First, a royal question would be carved right into a turtle shell or an ox bone. Next, they'd take a superheated bronze tool and apply it to the bone until it cracked. Finally, diviners would step in to interpret the shape of those cracks as a direct answer from a supreme deity, or maybe a royal ancestor. They used this to guide literally everything, from launching military campaigns to predicting the upcoming harvest.
Now, the Shang oversaw a highly complex and honestly sometimes brutal society. It was marked by these massive, grand bronze vessels, and yes, human sacrifice, but it also featured some really surprising social dynamics. Enter Fu Hao. When her fully intact, unlooted tomb was discovered in the 1970s, it revealed that she wasn't just a royal consort. She was a high priestess and a top-tier military general who commanded thousands of troops in battle. It's stunning proof of the immense power that elite women could hold during this era.
Let's move on to Chapter 3, Zhao, the longest dynasty, 790 years of rule.
Over time, the Shang kings grew corrupt, and they were violently overthrown by the Zhao. But to justify this massive rebellion, the Zhao introduced what is arguably one of the most vital concepts in all of Chinese history, the mandate of heaven. This established that political legitimacy isn't just an absolute forever right. It's a conditional cosmic grant given only to a virtuous ruler. If a leader becomes corrupt, if they fail to care for their people, well, heaven withdraws its mandate, and rebellion isn't just allowed, it's completely justified.
Despite those high ideals, the 790-year Zhou era is ultimately the story of a system totally breaking down. The early Western Zhou successfully maintained a really tight, centralized royal power through feudal-style land grants. But after an invasion forced the capital to move eastward, that order completely shattered. The Eastern Zhou period descended into brutal infantry warfare and total chaos as power fragmented out to independent, power-hungry regional lords.
But out of this aristocratic collapse, a brand new social class emerged, the Xian. I mean, imagine trying to manage a rapidly collapsing society. You need experts, right? The Xian evolved from being lower-ranking hereditary warriors into this incredibly influential class of educated bureaucrats and thinkers. They stepped directly into the chaos, tasked with managing complex state governments and desperately trying to figure out how to restore harmony to a totally fractured world. And that brings us to Chapter 4, a golden age of philosophy, the 100 Schools.
This deep existential crisis sparked the 100 Schools of Thought, which is without a doubt China's most fertile intellectual era. Basically, three major approaches emerged to cure the societal chaos. Confucius argued that humans needed strict ethics, family ritual, and virtuous leadership. Taoists argued the exact opposite. They believed in yielding to the natural flow of the universe, with minimal government interference. Meanwhile, the legalists took a much darker, pragmatic view. They said humans are naturally selfish, and order can only be achieved through strict, unforgiving laws and absolute state power.
To really grasp the playful yet profoundly deep skepticism of Taoism during this time, just look at Zhuangzi's famous thought experiment. He asked, did Zhuangzi merely dream that he was a butterfly, or is it perhaps instead the butterfly who is now dreaming that it is Zhuangzi? It's this beautiful, mind-bending question that completely undermined the rigid structures of human identity and objective reality that the Confucians were trying so hard to enforce.
Now for our final chapter, Chapter 5, Foundations of an Empire, Technological Revolution. You see, while all the philosophers were busy debating in the royal courts, the artisans, engineers, and farmers of ancient China were actually out there driving a massive material revolution. They perfected intricate piece mold bronze casting and essentially monopolized advanced silk production. They even achieved the early mastery of cast iron centuries before the rest of the world. And they built brilliant hydraulic engineering projects, like the Zhujiangyan irrigation system. Get this, that system is so well designed it is remarkably still in use today. But eventually, all this incredible technological and philosophical advancement collided right on the battlefield. By the end of the Warring States period, the political landscape had violently contracted down. Out of countless regional powers, only 7 major, heavily militarized states remained standing, and they were locked in a brutal, winner-take-all existential struggle for ultimate survival.
And the ultimate victor? The state of Qin. They thoroughly embraced those harsh, pragmatic laws of legalism we talked about earlier. This allowed them to systematically organize society and accumulate overwhelming economic and military might. By 221 BCE, they conquered all of their remaining rivals. The Zhou dynasty was permanently erased from the map, and a newly unified imperial China was born under Qin Shi Huang.
So, looking back, for over 4,000 years, from those early river settlements to the warring states, we've seen how the relentless pursuit of order drove the creation of agriculture, the mandate of heaven, and these profound philosophies. But as we leave the ancient dawn and stand right on the brink of imperial China, we are left with a massive question. China was finally unified and ordered by the ruthless laws of a single emperor. But did this strict legalism actually bring true peace, or just a terrifying new kind of tyranny? We'll leave that for you to ponder.